Today's mission has me rope dropping because there's something inside of the newly reimagined Toontown that I have wanted to show you for such a long time. But the new land is so popular, it's always crowded full of people that I haven't been able to film it. So hopefully getting here at the break of dawn makes today the day where I can show you something I'm so excited to share. No time, Mickey. I can't stop and say hi. I got a mission today. You know that I've got to be the only person that rope drop to look at buildings. I have to be statistically the only person doing that today. So I am a big fan of the new Toontown. I love the architecture, the buildings, the rolling hills, but I noticed when they opened it that there's a painting technique that is subtly being used, but it's very obvious once it's pointed out, and it's something that you can do with your own artwork, and my glasses are fogging up, and now I've lost all vision. They're disrobing the Jedi. Oh, there's a wise Jedi there, but no, they are disrobing them for another day of merch sales. So what we're looking at today is a painting technique you see a lot in the illustrated world. And maybe you're an illustrator, you already do this, or maybe you're an illustrator looking to put a little bit more depth into your work. You'll be able to learn from Imagineering where they took a cartoon world and applied a cartoon illustration technique into our real world, making it both feel real and animated at the same time. Let's go into Toontown so I can show you what I'm so excited to share. Let's pray that it's not covered in people like it has been every other time I've attempted to make this video. All right, not too bad. Steady flow of people, but not too bad. You can see the construction walls where they're already working on something over by the wishing tree. We'll obviously dive into that later, but we're headed back to the back nooks of Toontown when everybody else is here for Runaway Railway, and they should be. Yes, yes. Finally, I have it all to myself. So if you look at the ink and paint building, you can see with our old friend, the color wheel, where they've got the orange and blue next to each other. Those two colors live opposite of each other on the color wheel, therefore creating the most amount of contrast. But as we dive in deeper, you can see this darker shade of blue in the corner. It's about 20 to 40% darker than the mid-tone, which is the actual color of this wall we're looking at. And then as we go over to the edge, we can see the highlight that's been sprayed on the corner, which is about, I would say, 40% brighter than the wall that we're looking at. So when we add all this together, you have the parent color, which is the center of the wall, but then you have the child colors that are mixed from the parent. The dark edge in the corner, which makes it feel deeper and adds a faux shadow. And then the other child color on the edge, we see that highlight, which then gives everybody the idea that the sun is hitting this, and this little technique on each edge makes this feel so much brighter, so much more animated, so much deeper, and also so much larger. And when we move over to Daisy Cafe, we can see Cafe Daisy. Sorry, dyslexia strikes again. But when you come over here, you can see the same technique that is applied all around the building. And actually, they do something fascinating here where these cuts into the exterior, they actually painted those a complementary color, but much darker, to give our eyes an indication that that deep cut or groove is there. They also did the same thing on these little inlets. You obviously have the beveled, bent out, curved windows that gives you an animated feeling, but this painting technique takes the story the rest of the way. So as we come over here where there's no folks, you get a really good example of what I'm talking about, because see the natural shadow that exists on these faux planked boards, these shingles? It's actually also painted in there. You can see that there is a light airbrush a transparent light black airbrush that is making that shadow feel darker and deeper than what it actually is. And then that same technique is also applied to the bricks above. And then you even see the same technique being applied to the wood texture that Imagineers carved into the side of this plaster. Where if you look, you can see on the bottom lines, where my finger's at, on the bottom lines, there is a darker hit of paint. But then at the edge of all these wood grains, you see that white airbrush where obviously they taped all this up. They hit it with a airbrush, keeping it nice and transparent. And then when that meets the corner, where there's the darker green going to the lighter green, going to the highlight, you get a very animated look at the real world, but also in an insane amount of depth. And once you learn that technique, you'll learn to recognize it everywhere inside of Toontown. Once again, you can see the airbrush here, the airbrush around the bricks, adding in depth, the interior cut, painted darker, which is only like, you know, up to my first little baby knuckle on my finger. But yeah, even this cart that is out front, condiment cart, you can see the subtle airbrushing on that as well. And then it just continues absolutely everywhere. So what do you do with a color like white that doesn't have a parent and child color, because white's not technically a color, it's a pigment. White and black aren't colors, so what they do is they take a seafoam blue and they spray that on all of the areas that they want to feel like there is a shadow cast on it. And you'll notice a lot in comic books that they use blue to show like maybe a brunette's hair, to put low lights and highlights into it, they'll use blue. And that's because in the real world, the further our eyes look off into the distance, the more blue we see in everything. So even though City Hall is largely painted white, we still get this effect for consistency all throughout the land. So a lot of people always look at the beveled edges on the doors, right? Because that's such a great design technique. But this painting technique, I think, sells that and pushes it even more into a animated real world experience, which was the idea of Toontown, right? And by the way, if you haven't seen my Toontown documentary, I highly suggest checking it out. It'll be recommended below. We can see the same technique on these elongated, nice vertical lines, getting all that depth in there. And they even do it on the typography, where you can see the street repair sign has highlights, lowlights, all in the same color family, but it just gives that a sense of depth and also makes it look a little bronze. And then if we move away from the beautiful flower bed, you see it applied on this cream sphere, where you can see the low light, the highlight, all attached, giving that sphere so much more depth. And now as we come back to the center part of this backdrop, you get an idea how this painting technique makes everything feel larger and more animated. And this is something that you can easily do to your own artwork as well, by just taking whatever your base color is, mixing it a little bit darker to put in the folds, mixing it a little bit lighter to put on the top, or it can even be done with transparent layers, airbrushing black and white over the top of your base color, but just moving that opacity down to about 40%. And it is literally in every single facade, keeping the land both beautiful and highly consistent. Because once you do this in one area, you have locked yourself in to do it absolutely everywhere. Over here at Scrooge McDuck's house, we see the same technique applied, but in a more high contrast way to make this sign look as if it's actually made out of gold, as well as those coins that sit on the ridge of the third little piggy bank. And then you can see the golden mallard inside there. But as we go away from the monochromatic gold, you very much can see the airbrush technique on these interior bank vault style doors, which if you notice, the doors are inside of a horseshoe, which is considered to be good luck. As we inspect closer over here, you can even see this technique applied to the tile work over on Good Boy Grocer. And you really do have to stay consistent with this technique. If you put it in one spot, you have to put it everywhere, or the whole illusion falls apart. And then check out this. they actually painted this edge a darker shade than that edge. So right in there is how you put depth into your artwork and into your storytelling. The Gag Factory facade, which is newly painted because we can no longer go into the store. You see how they did the airbrushing a little bit more exaggerated here on this folded steel. I guess perforated would be the term. And then over here at the powerhouse, all along the banisters, all along the porch, the windows. Well, yeah, the entire Gag Factory has these techniques installed all around it. So we come back and we do a long shot. You can see from a distance how all of that shading makes a huge impact into the land. And then here's the building we can actually get from a distance, clean shot. And just look at how great we can see all of that shading put inside of what used to be the old train barn where the Jolly Trolley would go in. Tracks have been removed and it's now a stroller runoff, but that painting technique is very visible and you can really tell it over in the bricks and the stacking tires. Anywhere where there's lots of lines together, the technique stands out. So just look at the bottom half of all of these gutters and now look at the top part and you can see this technique come to life. So when you combine that with the lack of straight edges, where none of the doors and none of the windows are actually right corners, they're all beveled out, it adds that layer. And here they even went with a more drastic, where it's not actually parent colors, it's complementary colors to just give more of a feeling of depth. Friends, am I so happy that I rope dropped and came here in the morning to do this, because it's been absolutely jam-packed in Toontown. Since the land is reopened with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, possibly my favorite of all new modern Disney attractions, and I put that against Rise of the Resistance as well. This land has been jam-packed and being used the way that it was intended. Lots of families, lots of little ones, and I've wanted to show this technique for a while, but I could never get through all the people to get these nice, clean shots of all the buildings. So if you're enjoying this bizarre kind of content and you want me to keep rope dropping so I can better explain to you how the Disney theme park is designed to create so much immersion, but also if you're an artist, how you can take this into your own artwork, make sure you subscribe to Hey Brickey and go on this wild journey with me, because nobody's searching for this. Nobody's looking for this. This is very niche. So if you're here, you're family, and why not sign up today? The firehouse is absolutely my favorite building in the land. It's the first one that you see. It's kind of the most on the nose one, and the holiday decorations are fantastic. And I love the little Dalmatian that pops out of that window right there. But I just absolutely adore this. And I also feel like it just gives vibes of both Main Street USA and Walt Disney World, and also here at home at Disneyland. Now, this isn't the only land that uses this design technique. You can find it in other lands, particularly Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but this is the one where it looks the most obvious. It's the most exaggerated. Because if I had to sum up what the design aesthetic is for Toontown, it's exaggerated. Everything here has to feel very, very exaggerated to transform our brains into that we're living in a cartoon mindset. I love the old school camera for the button, the doorbell, and then the aperture front window. Here's another great detail nobody talks about. If you look at old school American factories, they would have sort of some painted tiles of glass in the window panes to, still let light in, but to bring down direct sunlight and to reduce heat. And you can see that these are painted, mostly that off yellow, but then there's a little bit of that different color in there. But look at the hinges. They applied hinges to all of these as if these would actually swing open if the workers in the Gag Factory were getting too hot, and you know there's insanely no way that those ever open. So once again, just tiny little real world details in this over-exaggerated land that make it feel even more real. And you can see that technique over here on the flowers as well. Looking inside the clams, where it is just such a fun design technique used over and over and over again by artists everywhere, and in this instance, Walt Disney Imagineering. So now when we do the long shot from the distance, you see how that aesthetic blends in so well with that outer facade of the rolling hills, where you can find Walt's barn, a hidden Mickey, various different numbers and logos all hidden in there. And then they also use a similar technique when they do the outward city on the edge of the business district of Toontown, where you can see those homes that we never visit along the way, but that is done using that purple color palette, a dark purple, a lighter shade of purple, a lavender if you will, the glowing windows to let us know that people are in there living their lives on the outer edges of Toontown. Perfect. Good Boy Grocers has a sort of Southern California, mid-century, like googie design aesthetic, where it's very over-exaggerated, but it has that kind of when California was shifting from an Art Deco look to a mid-century look. And I absolutely love that you can just see all of the green and yellow horizontal lines are 3 different colors stacked together, then matched with neon for the evening, because this paint job also comes to life when it's lit properly. How fascinating is this? Also, the paparazzi loves Toontown. You can see that they're filming a commercial there in the center of the yard. There's a crew down there filming this cute little family. And then they have guests that they have balloons that have the proper attire, and they're just having them walk a loop behind them, the production team. So they just keep getting the guests that are all on the contract waiver that are signed off, looping behind these folks to get that perfect background. And then over here in the back lot, you can see the actual film crews that have all their camera equipment. It's awesome. So I absolutely love how Disney Imagineering takes illustration techniques that artists have been doing on canvas and paper since the beginning of art. And I love seeing those techniques applied to our real world, which creates just such a mindset of this is a giant art installation. And that's why I love the Disney parks, because it's where art comes to life. And this land is like literally living inside of a cartoon. And if you're like me, you grew up loving Saturday mornings, the morning before school, watching a little cartoon and watching cartoons when you got home, back when there weren't dedicated cartoon channels 24 hours a day. But just the ability to walk in here, and then as a professional illustrator to see these techniques come to life, it's just phenomenal. And then for those of you that just have to know what's on the other side of the construction walls, they have dug out a trench around the wishing tree, which was honestly my most disappointed part of this new Toontown. And it's the area they've had the most problems with. The roots had to be repainted. They've had this area over here benched off. There's just something that they are not quite getting right with the wish tree. I wish they'd use this as a moment to pull it out and to put in a sculpted tree that could have an internal lighting package. That's my wish for the wishing tree, is to remove it. But you can see that they're here working, trying to get it where they want it to be, which kind of ruined my one big shot that I wanted for this video, because I love standing up here on the accessibility deck and just gazing over to the Toontown outer aesthetic, because I absolutely love this facade. I've always loved this land, even though there's not been a lot for me to do here until Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway showed up. But I just love looking at this outer aesthetic. It's just absolutely beautiful. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this comprehensive look at the painting technique that makes Toontown feel so animated and allows us in our real world to step into an animated world. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you would check out this video right here, which is my documentary showing you the history of Toontown, the good, bad, ugly, and indifferent of how we got to this moment inside of Disney history. Thank you so much for watching. Can't wait to see you real soon.